30 seconds and counting. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have liftoff. Hello, everyone. So first, let me get these out of the way. Thank you for the follows from Local Koopa, Sly Chess, Gubberts, Kevin Dawson 13, and No Theory Please. Great name. Scares me a little bit because that's what we do here is a lot of theories. Hopefully that won't be a problem if we can prove that. Yes, much better. All right. So today is our Wednesday. It's at 11 o'clock. I was going to change to 12 o'clock because we thought that might not conflict with Sudakus's stream, but as it turns out, it won't matter. I only do it for an hour and we're still going to collide. But the good news is when we're done here, you can go right over to Sudakus's site and check him out. I will raid him after this. So he also does teaching. He does a little different style, which is great because you guys want variety, right? You don't want everybody doing the same things all the time the same way. So, and I know my way is definitely different because on Mondays we introduced the concept or theme, and for this week it was rook and pawn endgames. Rook and pawn endgames. We went over specific positions and situations. In fact, let's see if we can't go and look at one of those. Let's go to, oops, sorry, we want to go to teams. We're going to, not teams, we're going to go to a study. That's where we're going to go. We're going to go to a study, my public studies endgames class where we've been working on this stuff. And we were looking at a lot of rook and pawn endgames. And in ones like this, black has a good chance to draw if the king is in front of the pawn. We want that king in front of the pawn. We talked about that. And we talked about that we wanted to keep the king from getting shelter behind this pawn. That would threaten checkmates, and then things just wouldn't be as good. And we don't want to allow this and this to happen because we would also be in trouble as black. So what we want to have happen is push that pawn, right? We want to get here at some point. So he pushes that pawn, and then when we go up here, when he seeks this great position, we could start chasing that king, and the king, no matter where he goes, is going to get harassed by our rook, and we'll just get a perpetual, or he'll eventually leave the pawn and we'll be able to take it. That's the basic behind that is that we want our king here. The king there gives us chances to draw. So same thing here. We have the king here. The rook is taking over the file rank. So we're looking good. Here the king is already up, so it gets dangerous because now if you do this, the pawn just comes and then you go back and you're too late. You can't go back because of the checkmate. So this one was a little different position. We said basically here you have to go after the pawn, but the king, remember, gets to hide behind the pawn. So it really matters on who has the advantage to going first. We want to be able to find our way to keep pushing that pawn down. And once we get the pawn down far enough, white's going to be able to queen the pawn. All right. So these positions are the Philidor and the Lucina. And the difference is the white king, what the strong side, the one with the pawn, is ahead of the pawn, king the pawn. So we went over that. We didn't. I promised you to do a few new things, and so let's just look at a couple of other things that might happen with rooks and pawns and stuff like that. So this was just pawns, pawns. I thought I had one. No, these are all rooks still. Okay, so we're gonna have to go to a. Let me just go ahead and go to an board editor, and we'll clear that board. Lovely, just for this kind of work. And I just want to like maybe put, let's see, we'll put this pawn here. We'll put this king here. We'll even give him a couple of pawns if you like. And we have a king that's trying to combat. And so we have a situation like this. And let's say that you have a rook. It could be anywhere, right? The rook could be here. All right, let's take that to analysis board real quick. So now with white to move, this might seem obvious. Hey, Flavio. Hey, Chris. How's life going, guys? So this might seem obvious, but I don't know how many people mess this up. I see rooks come over here, right? Rooks will move here, and the rook will move here, and then they say, "I'll get my king in," and then you're in a race, right? You're in a race with the king, and not always the best situation. But they miss, right, the immediate taking over with the pawn protecting. And why? If you take, of course, you queen, and if you don't take, if you're, oh, sorry, if you don't take when you're black, what are you going to do? You could step out, we take, you take, and we queen. And even another one, which is important to know because it's paradoxical in some ways. Even if you had, let's say, another rook that you decide, if I had a black rook here, right? And you say, it's protected. I don't have to move my king out and I do something like this. It's just queen. You don't even have to take the rook, right? So what happens is we think, remember, you have imagine a black rook here, okay? I can actually flip back to this and add a black rook here. And we could put a white rook here so that you don't have easy mates, right? Okay. So let's go back to an analysis board again. So you might be thinking rook takes rook, stops the pawn. I'm good. But what you miss is, of course, you could just queen. You don't have to take anything. You just queen because the rook is blocking the black's rook is blocked from taking the queen that gets queened. Thanks. I appreciate it, Flavio. Appreciate it. Oh yeah, I gotta play. I want to play in that tournament someday. Sudakus puts on a little arena tournament every Wednesday, and of course, it collides with this. Otherwise, I would definitely try to participate in at least one of his tournaments. Maybe what we'll do one of these Wednesdays is instead of me giving the review lesson, I'll just go play in his tournament, and we'll watch me play in his tournament. We might do that for fun. So this is one of those instances. And the idea is to get the rook where the pawn is going to queen. And we'll see opportunities for this throughout our games. All right. So we're going to look at that. We also have to look at things like the rook trying to stop this pawn. So let's go back to our board editor where, if this rook were here and this rook were here and we could get these two out of here, right? How do you do this? Because you want to get your king over here and he wants to get his king over here to stop that. I mean, that's the game plan. I showed you guys a game a long time ago with my daughter where she had the opportunity to do the same thing. Black finally took off the pawn but had to give up, trade the rooks, and then her king was able to come over and win the pawn and get the magic position and win. So sometimes you give up this pawn and the rook, trade it all off so that your king, though, because you got to get the king over there to help. And once the king is all the way over here, your king can come over here and eat pawns and hopefully win the game. So it's not always this pawn that queens, but the threat of this pawn queening gives you that opportunity. And then the last one I'd share with you is that sometimes you have it where that the you're like, well, I want to get, I'm like, say I'm like this, and not like that. Say you're like this, okay. And the rook is behind the passed pawn, which is usually the right way to do it. But you say, white now has, let's go to analysis board. White now has an opportunity to queen because he could say check. You go to attack the rook, we queen. You can't take the rook anymore. You could take the queen, but then we're up a rook. That's another instance that happens a lot is where You're in this situation, and white's rook is in the wrong square. Black is in a better position, and black has to make sure that you don't have a check. You have a check, even it can't be where I could take you off, right? So let's just say, for instance, we're like this. White here doesn't work because we just take you off, and the pawn never queens. But if there's any space like there's any space where I can lay in a check and you can't take it off right away, I'm going to queen. And granted, you're going to take off my queen, but I get to take. All right, good, good. Yeah. Oh, so Chris, you think I should play and live stream me playing in Sudakus's tournament? I agree. I agree. Actually, I built a poll. Let me see. So I had ideas for Wednesdays just to see if you guys were, maybe not so much bored of this, but that you wanted something else. Yes. Let's see. I gotta see. Sudaku's tourney. Okay. Oh, beautiful. Okay. I'm gonna try a poll. Now this isn't using. I'm not using the. I'm not using the whatchamacallit. I'm not using the. It'll come to me in a second. I'm not using Nightbot for the poll. I'm trying inside of Twitch allows you to do polls also. And we've done both. I think Chris, you run polls for me. All right. So while you guys look at that, I gave it 5 minutes. So hopefully people can do that. Let's go look at our arena tournament we did on Monday with the Rook End Games as the idea for the tournament. And we had 9 people playing it. That was great. And we had win Brandon UKP. Brandon won this tournament. He said it was the first tournament he's ever won, so we were very happy for him. His performance was 1597, pretty good. When he's only 1081. And Dolo Bender came in second, and Leonard came in third. And you would think, oh, Dolo Bender did a 1582 performance, and Dolo Bender's rating at this speed was 1495. A blitz. So you say, oh, wow, Brandon, but what'd you do? Get easy wins? No, Brandon did not get easy wins. If we look, he played Dolo Bender twice, beat him once, lost once. He drew with King. He beat King. He beat Leonard, who came in third, and he beat Chris. And he beat Chris twice, and he lost to the Modern Ancient. So it was not an easy time. He did not have an easy time at all. So we're going to highlight Brandon because he won the tournament. I've done this before. I kind of like highlighting the person who won. So let's see how he did. In this first game, as you can see, is against the Modern Ancient, and Brandon's black, and Brandon does lose this game. So let's take a look at what he missed and see if there's opportunities to learn about rook and pawn endgames. So white is offering a trade of rooks. Should you do so? Of course you can. And understanding that most rook endgames, that is a possibility for you to do. But black says, no, I don't want to just trade. I'm not going to trade. Your king would go backwards, but I'm going to come up here because if you take, you'll fix my pawns. See that? Smart move. He wants to fix, he says, fix my pawns. And white says, yeah, well, you take and I'll have 2 center pawns and, he'll be fine. So black says, no, 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 I really want you to take. Black says, nope, I'm going to attack your pawn. White says, I'm going to attack your pawn. Now, black could have said, great, I'll just lock this up some more. Right? Could have done that. And at this point, black should have said, I can get my king into the game, threaten to win pawns. Okay. But, right, first game, leaves the free candy. Leaves free candy, guys. Not taken. I have no idea why not. So one of the things to understand about rook endgames, and this is very useful, is that this king is holding all 3 of these squares. There's only one rook to contend with, only this black rook. And even if this white rook were nowhere to be found, like still over here in the corner, this king is keeping black's rook out of here. The pawn is keeping his rook out of here. And this pawn is keeping his rook out of there. So look at all those squares. Now, this is the only fully open file There's a semi-open file and a fully open file. In this fully open file, white can control 5 of those squares right off the bat. Right off the bat, keeping the black rook out. So although it's an open file and it looks like rooks do what? Rooks belong on open files. Black could do the same thing, right? If we go back to the beginning, this square, no rooks are going to want that. So black could go here and say, well, now your rook doesn't have any of these squares. And then black could be pushing these pawns and putting his rook behind one of these pawns once he creates a semi-open file or an open file. You don't have to play on the given open file. You may want to save your rook and play it on a file that you open at your timing. Okay, so we get to this. White misses the free candy, right? Could have just taken free candy. Always got to look for free candy. I don't know if black decided that, oops, I got to take this because I missed a free candy, but I think it's because black is figuring out that he can win a pawn. So he goes after the pawn. This is the only way to protect it. And black could say, good, I'm going to win that pawn. Good. Let's see. Yes, he does. Now, white does have the opportunity to come in here and start eating pawns. So black has to be careful because he could get this pawn, but then how long will it take him to take off another pawn? Oh, wow. 66% said I should play in the Sudoku's tournament. All right. Hey, thanks, Dola Bender. We're going over one of your games, actually. Ah, I understand. University. School is important, man. Do that, definitely. But thanks for checking in. And yes, we're going over some of your games as well, but not this game yet, but it will be. But oh, look at that. So I might go ahead and have to do that next time. I'll see about playing in. We'll just do that next week. Maybe I'll plan on that. We'll see how that goes. See how everybody likes it, and maybe during that game, during those games, I'll still try to highlight end games. But that would work. That would work. All right, so let's finish up there. So black can take, but then white gets in here, and it could be messy. It could be messy. So let's see what happens. That is what happens. Black kind of went the wrong way to get this trade. We do want to trade, but we need to get this pawn up. But the king has got to go. The king has got to somehow get in here or in here. The king has got to get involved. So we get a trade. Again, this pawn needs to push fast, right? Need that pawn. Need to push that. So the king went all on his own. And the nicety is here that you don't have to have the king go on his own. All right, so the first thing is we could go this way. He could take this way. You go again. Now watch. He can go after that pawn or at least free himself for that pawn. And now you have a passed pawn. You already have a passed pawn, guys. If he takes, you take back and you're going to queen first. Okay, if he takes, you take back, he's going to queen first. If he goes here, you just go by him. So way back here at this move, white has to do this just to stop you from getting your passed pawn. That's why we normally want to lead with the potential passed pawn. We want this one out in front of this one so that if he does this kind of thing, we could have we can have the pawns, it would take back and still crash on down. So white would have to know not to take this pawn, but to try to block here. Try to block here. Black should just keep on going. Why? Because now he can say here, or he could go here. Here works fine, but no, I'm sorry, it doesn't work because white could just let you take back, and then you still have to do this. So why not? Where was I? Yeah, so I believe you could just do this. He takes, you take. Going to go after that pawn, you push, and now you're queening again, right? That pawn's going to go, or this pawn will go, and you still should beat these pawns. Hey, Leonard. So Brandon still had a chance, and this is why endgames and pawn endgames are so critical. Are so critical. Right here, Brandon still had a chance. He had a chance all the way, even back here. Yes, he lost that pawn. Yes, he's going to lose another pawn. Yes, he should run, but he's got a chance. But he's got to know to push the potential passer. His king can even stay over here to make believe he wants to stop white from queening. If black can get his pawn to this square, if that pawn gets to this square, this king is free to go over here and try to slow down white because he's going to get a passer. He's going to get a passer and going to queen a pawn. Very instructional at that situation. We got to see that. That's so critical. Game. He lost to Modern Ancient. This one he beat Chris. We don't like to show Chris losses, but we'll show one here. All right, so he takes over, and Chris doesn't. Chris went for the open file, and Brandon did a good job of what? Taking away these 3 squares. Remember, 5 squares are now taken. Let's see if he looks for, and he looks for the rook trade also. Again, he doesn't have to. His play is on the king side because this is where he has his potential passer. So he doesn't have to do that. But obviously, if you can get this trade, it might work out for you. Good job of breaking. But now we have a passed pawn. And the problem with this passed pawn is it'll be passed for the whole game. There's really no way for black to stop it from being a pass pawn. But look at this fun kind of stuff that we don't always think about, right? Could go here. Yeah, he could take, you could take. Can't queen, you're going to catch him, right? So it's a possibility. You can even push this later and go after him. Just thoughts, right? Things you could do because again, we know that we might be able to break up this double pawn and get a passer. It's just things to learn. I mean, there's just so much to do, so much to learn. So this move was interesting. It takes away these 2 squares from possible pass pawns. And this move says, okay, now both your pawns aren't going anywhere. Your pawns are not going anywhere. But we got to remember the rule of the square. So again, black could say, well, I'm going to try to go somewhere because if you were to take, I can actually come after you. If you move, I take you, right? Now you have double pawns. If you don't move and you figure, aha, I'll get my king into the game, I can take here because I can still easily catch you because I'm well within the square, right? The rule of the square, well within the square. So right here, black could say, yeah, let's see if we can simplify some more. White doesn't have to take, of course. Now, black could take and say, I got rid of my double pawns, and now I have a potential pass pawn of my own. I've got a potential pass pawn of my own. And remember, he can even go here and then later go here because if you take, he could take, and he's still within the square. Right? So he's got to get rid of these double pawns, and that would be a good time, a good way to do it. Hey, Chess Wizard, how are you? You missed our poll. We did a poll. Anyway, all right, so let's see how the game actually transgressed a little bit. So this pawn move, it's nice. It keeps the king out, but it does entice and invite some more pawn breaks. And black goes for this side. I would have liked it. There we go. We get the push. Maybe a little late, but I like the push. I like it. And now black has the potential pass pawn. He should he missed. He missed. He should. Chris, you should go all the way. You could go all the way, my friend. If he goes here, you just take him. He then takes here, you come back, you're still going to win him. And if he takes here first, then you just take him off. And if he goes here, you easily catch him. And now you have 2 versus 1. You have a potential pass pawn. You're doing better. You've gotten rid of the double pawns, and now you have a passer yourself. This is a great way to play this. This would be the way we would want it to be done. So Chris had a great opportunity. Push it all the way. The thought is, I don't want to lose my. You're not going to lose your pawn. You're going to take it back, and then you have 2 against 1. This pawn, this potential pass pawn, wants to be pushed. So we need to push it all the way. We do get the push though eventually. Look at that. Look at this. Beautiful. Now he goes after your backward pawn, right? Okay. So what are we going to do now? We might eat that one. We might try to get to this one, right? Your move, his move, your move, you protect the pawn. So let's see what happens. Good. All right. So Chris does protect the pawn. Brandon is nonplussed. Brandon, oh no, where'd we go? Where'd we go? Where'd we go? All right. So if we go after this pawn, he gets to take quick, we get to take, and then he actually gets the opposition easily. He's ahead of you. He's going to win the race for the pawns. But the problem is you have no moves. As you realize, you have no moves. So part of the question is, could you have, at this point, instead of moving here, maybe move here? That would be better. If you had moved here, if his king moves here, you don't even want to do that move, right? Because then again, his king comes here and you have no squares. So you want to stay up on top, right? So if you go here, you want to go here. He goes here, you go here, you won back the opposition. Best he's going to do is trade pawns. You're good to go. So this is all about the opposition here. And by going here, Chris, he went here. His pawn takes this square, his king takes that square. You can't continue to protect your pawn. So this is where I always tell you guys this, why I like endgames, right? Chris has, not that square, Chris has 7 squares to go to with his king. And maybe he knows instinctively, I got to do something with my king. I don't have time I don't want to let him take my pawn and then push this one down. I got to do something with my king. And so he would look at these 3 squares. This one would work. This one works. This one fails. And he picked the one out of the 3 that fails. And so he takes, and like I said, white gets the race. He gets there way before Chris. And yeah, now he has a passer. All right, good game. Good game. We definitely saw something there we can learn from. Good. All right, now let's check out a Dolo Bender game. But because I don't know how much time, well, I don't know. I know exactly how much time we have, about 35 minutes. So we could take a look at a loss to Dolo Bender, then maybe we'll jump and look at the win against Dolo Bender. So again, Chris takes the file, and White gets to move over. Right? White says, "Hey, here I am." We trade off, and then Brandon goes the wrong way. So I'm curious how he wins this one. I say he went the wrong way because the center is right, the potential passer, and these guys need a little help. I don't know that he needs to be on the king. Oh, he's coming back to the center. He finds his way back to the center, and his opponent gets his potential passer. Now, again, we got to see if Brandon can make a potential passer. I like it that he ignores this. There's no real threat. He can let him take. He can even take back with the king. So I like that he did not react to that threat. He just let it. And he did not take on Prasan, which would also probably be a mistake because the king would get over and we get to try to make another passer. So like it that he just ignored it, right? The king is blocked out. So that's the best situation you could have there. Like the pawn push, keeping any pawns from pushing freely and trying to get rid of double pawns. Just continue. Oh, love it. Love it. Good job of pushing forward. And now if he takes back and he ends up with a passer. Now he's got a passer and white has a passer. So they both have pass. Black steps into the breach quickly. Now white can't get to either one of these squares to try to stop the pawn. Black has to retreat. Now just note, if white retreats, black can't chase because this pawn queens. Right? So white could have just retreated. Now, if he goes here, he gets to step over, still trouble. So I don't know. I'm trying to see how black wins this game. I mean, loses this game. Ah, that's how. All right. So remember, you cannot go behind the pawn because this pawn will just run. You cannot go behind the pawn. Pawn will just run. Totally agree, Chess Wizard. This should be a draw. This should have been a draw, but now because, yep. All right. Good. We see what happened. Brandon just made the mistake of stepping behind the pawn. If Brandon just stayed here and just stayed with his pawn, it would have been a draw. Should have been a draw. So not bad. We see what went wrong. All right. You played Chris again. We already showed one of those. Let's go to the game he won against Dolo Bender. Since Dolo Bender is a little bit stronger player, 1495 Dolo Bender is, and Brandon is 1081. So yes, actually, Chess Wizard played correctly. This should definitely be a draw. Even the computer analysis shows that this is a drawn position. I start off with a drawn position on purpose. So white goes all the way up to the center. Why? Because he says his rook is covering this square. His king doesn't need to. Now, the only thing I, again, like different is the king could be here because we know that all these 5 squares are covered by the king and the pawns. And therefore, the rook might be able to go someplace else where you're going to maybe create a new open file, and you could pull them off the back rank because the king would be keeping the rook out. But this is fine too, as long as your rook stays on the back rank. Notice that white already has declared he's not trading his rook because his king isn't there to protect it. So he says, nope, we're keeping the rooks on the board, which I like. I think it's a good idea. This one is interesting. Black takes, white takes, and then this becomes our potential passer. This one is going to be a hard time passing because he's got 1 pawn against him and he can't get by him. With 2 white pawns here and no pawn here, we get to push, take back, and go. means the rook is going to need to be over here eventually. So let's see how this flows. Doesn't take. Says, nope, I'm not going to give you that opportunity. But it does give tempo gains by pushing this pawn, which I think White could have done, but he takes over. Look at this. He takes over the second open file. There's two open files. This one is clogged up with kings and pawns. So White says, I'm going to take this open file now that it's opened up. One of the things I keep seeing in my mind's eye is this. I see pushing that king back, right? The king has to go back. Chest of thought. Once the king goes back, your king can hold all three of these squares. The pawns hold these squares from the rook, which means now your rook is free to come and attack from behind. And we don't know what would happen. It would be an interesting place, but things to think about. All right. Pawn push. I think it's a waiting move by Brandon. He's like, well, let's see what you're going to do. And he finally decided. Now, he could have done that before the pawn push, but maybe he was worried about the rook, but he should still be worried about the rook coming in. And it looks like Dolobender just missed that there was free candy to be had. I think he's thinking his rook can come in, but actually that would be possibly a mistake. If the rook comes here and says check, the king can come back, but then the king can come here and say, now I have two pieces attacking your pawn. And all the while, though, this rook has this pawn under control. I don't know. Let's see what happens. He goes for the check first, goes after this pawn, and then he takes that pawn. This is actually, think about it. I don't know if it had to happen that way, but this is brilliant play by Brandon. Brilliant play by Brandon. Why? First thing is, the king has only one square to go to. So this is forced. And then Brandon says, well, I will attack the pawn. The king can come here or here. Now, of course, if the king comes here, Brandon can get a draw by repetition if he wants, but maybe he shouldn't want a draw by repetition because he's looking pretty good. But there's still this check followed by this. So that's all I'm looking at. So I think Dolobender pretty much had to come here. But by going here, now he's two moves away, so he's not going to be able to scarf this pawn. By the way, this is another reason I would have liked to see this pawn be here early, right, before we start going this foray into the backfield, because then when the king goes back, the king can't get here to win this pawn. All right, but anyway, so since he goes here, he loses the pawn with tempo, and look at that. How is that? He says, I could go back down here, but then 1-2 moves, you might get in again, which I wouldn't have worried about because he could have threatened this pawn. But look at this. He just says, now you can't get in here at all, king. My king is keeping you out. My pawns are shielding me from your rook attacks. There's not going to be any rook attacks coming at my king. And if you go after my pawn, I'm going to win your pawn and be protecting mine with the same stroke. And in fact, I'm threatening to win your pawn right now. So what are you going to do about it? He moves it. Now, again, white could take, black could take back, and white could say, I'm going to win the pawn. You have no way to stop me. And that is what happens. Excellent play by Brandon. Excellent play. He does go after the pawn, but it's too late. He gets to take that one. And look, he goes after this pawn. He could take here and protect that pawn at the same time. He would give up this pawn, but he'd have another fully passed pawn to play with. So, that is what he does. We get the trade, and he goes after the last vestige of hope for black, this far pawn, and white goes back for the rook pawn. White could just say, nope, I'm going to defend. He pushes. The rook is holding it. But again, I'm liking here because then the best this rook has is to go here. And, you don't have to worry. You could just take this pawn and then reactivate your rook. But this is okay. And we go after another pawn. So we're trading this pawn for this pawn now. That's the idea here. That's what I see as the idea of what he's doing. All right. Goes after, but he says, I want that pawn. But he might get into trouble. Look, again, the pawn is blocking his rook from getting over here to help. How is he going to stop the pawn from queening? Can't. No matter where he goes, the pawn queens. So again, what is the whole mission? Is to queen our pawn, guys. You want to queen the pawn. So when he came here, again, black probably should just say, nope, I'll, right? And then white, it's up to white now where he wants to go. And again, if I was white, I would chase the rook. But that's not what happened. He decided to take this pawn, which he could not take. Just not enough tempo to get back in line and stop the queen. So then that game should be effectively over. Let's just see if there's anything. Look, oh yes, this is nice. Actually, I think I was watching this game during the tournament. White says, I can win this game. I have a rook and a queen. And a lot of beginners will say, well, I'm not going to give up my queen. I just got my queen. No. White says immediately, Brandon says, no, I can skewer your king to the rook, and then I could just take the rook. I'm going to just take the rook. Goes after the pawn, wins the pawn. Now, he starts pushing for another rook or queen, and king attacks the rook, and the rook just slides to the other end of the board, and no time for black. Beautifully done, Brandon. Multiple moves. I really like the king move. I like the check with the rook. Again, black should have been able to go for a draw to a degree, but I like that you would have been able to push with the pawn and chase him away. Beautifully played. Beautifully played. Hey, Ratchet Lodros. I wonder what that means. I really do wonder what that means. Hello, though. Hello, hello. How are you? So we do chess lessons here. So hopefully we do it on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Today we're going over games, and what we were learning, was endgames, rook and pawn endgames to be specific. All right. So we had another game by Brandon there. Let's see if we can find Chris. You did have a win, man. Let's go check out Chris's win. And it was against Sudakus. And Sudakus never moved. So not a good one to go over. Sorry. How about Chess Wizard? Chess Wizard had a game against Sudakus, and I know Sudakus did move in this game. All right, let's go through a game with Chess Wizard, who's online, and he had a win, right? So let's take a look at it. Oh, boom, boom. Let's see. Let's see what we got going here. Yes, exactly. Lucina position and Philidor position. And then what we do that on Monday. We introduce the concepts. Rook and introduce the concept. Then after we introduce the concept for about an hour, we have a tournament. All are welcome to join the tournament in the future, to join our team so that you can know about when we hold these tournaments. You don't even have to be visiting us on stream. When the tournament goes live, you could play. And this one is the position that we started with. This was our starting position. Instead of having an opening that you study, this one we're studying an endgame. So it was a rook endgame. One open file, and the position was deemed equal by the computer before we started. But as you see, a lot of these games we're not getting rook endgames. Why? Because we're trading off that rook. Again, I think it's a mistake. None of these five squares are available to black. I think white should be trying to see what he could do as far as maybe locking up this side first, keeping the rook handy. I really like what Chris did. Chris pushed this pawn and then pushed this pawn so that he could make a second open file for his rook, one where the king isn't over there restricting his rook's movement. That was brilliant, Brandon. Brilliant. That was really good, Brandon. I'm still raving about that because I think that was excellent. Interesting choice here. We've learned about the opposition, right? That we want to take the opposition versus going here. So taking the opposition would have been a nice move. Would have been happy with that, but we didn't, and that's okay. I moved up here. Now black could actually sneak in if he wants and cause havoc. So let's see what happens. Nope, pushes here, and now white says right away, I'm going to keep you out. Again, again. We look, black could have went here. Yes, white could get here, can't get here. Pawns, 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 pawns. Could have tried taking, and then running that boy down. Might have worked. We'd have to kind of look at it. I don't know for sure because he's going after this one. And which one do we take? We take this one. He's got to move this one, right? because he can't afford to take here maybe. But I think it's better to just take here. I don't know. I don't know. Push, push. White's going to queen first without check and black queens, and we'd have the two queens fun going on. So that could have been a possibility. Anyway, let's see how this one goes. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. We got some pawn trades. So black could have gotten rid of his double pawns, right? And try to get an outside pass, or white would have to block it immediately pretty much. Because if this pawn gets here, then we got a passer and we got troubles. But nope, we take with this pawn, keeping double pawns. Now, granted, this king might have trouble getting in, but right now the king can get in. So we'll have to see if white closes this up, this pawn closes this side up, and we're only playing on the king side. Uh-oh, uh-oh. Yep, take a look, guys. This is definitely a mistake by white. This is what happened with Chess Wizard. So Chess Wizard came in, said, I'm attacking this pawn. White, even if he protects this pawn, is now going to lose these. And why? Because he's thinking for some reason he's going to do damage over here. There's three, even though it's a double pawn, it's still 3 against 2. Still 3 against 2. Yeah, black wins here, especially with the king running away the wrong way. Totally. Totally agree. You think if f6 it might be a definite win? I don't know, but I know it's trouble now. If white goes here, this locks up this side, right? Black's king cannot get in here. Black's king cannot get in here. So now if we do something like Ratchet says, maybe we do this. Well, now the king could just play over here, right? He can't get here yet. And if he starts pushing and trying to make things happen, we still have 4 against 3. The king is going to have to stay over here because of the 4 against 3, and it should be a draw. The king is in a good position. He doesn't have opposition anymore, though, but he's in a good position. Don't know how this would go. Actually, I don't even know. I don't know if black can win this. I mean, draw this even. I think he should, because now white's king can't get in. So I think you can. All right. So yeah, here the problem is this is the blunder. This is the mistake. White goes away from the queen side, and black easily can get behind the pawns, and this pawn is still stopping the potential passer. If this pawn were a true total passed pawn, like this pawn was not here, then you wouldn't worry about the king getting behind you, because as soon as it got behind you, you'd race. But it's not a passer. It's only a potential. It's only got potential. It isn't a passer. So now he gets to eat up all of his pawns way before white does. And he's going to queen way before white does. And that means game over. Now, this is interesting. He took the pawn when he should have come here or here, right? I mean, he should come here or here to keep this pawn from queening. But even if he came here, that's interesting because the king could escort it down and we can't get here in time, but we probably have tricks like here and then we might be able to get back over. But taking the pawn is interesting because we're allowing the queen. Very interesting. Let's see how it goes. So now they both have queens and yeah. So this is making it a lot harder on black than it needed to be. A lot harder. So again, even if you, and this is important because this is what we've talked about a lot. Even if black goes here, now white could say, well, I'm going to still queen. I'm going to still queen. And you could say, well, not yet, right? Right? Not yet. And you could step away if you wanted to. Uh-oh. I don't know who's calling me, but I'm not answering right now. So black could say here because, but we could go back after the pawn. You go to protect the pawn, we come back after you go. And we're going to just march our queen up the board until we get to be at a point where you can't come back to protect. Right? That's just standard. That's standard. So first thing is that what black didn't have to give up the pawn. I mean, black could have taken this pawn safely by chasing the king. But even if he wasn't sure of that, at this point, black could just say, I'm going to take off this pawn. You could let him queen, and you could trade. Why? Because now you have two passed pawns. You still win the game easily, easily. So we don't want to give up the queens and make this game so much more difficult, so much more difficult to win. He does win, but wow, he made this game so much more difficult. And White did his best to get a perpetual, and I think he might have been able to get it, but he ended up in this position where he had to trade the queens, and then it's a definite loss. I didn't. I watched this game also live. I didn't want to see if Oh well, yeah, you had a perpetual here. If you do this, it's just why would Black allow any of this to happen? Get into this mess at all? They both had over 4 minutes left in a 5 minute game. By the way, 4 minutes and 43 seconds. It's a +3. And when the critical time came right here, this is the critical move. Critical move at this stage, Black had 5 minutes and 8 seconds. 5 minutes and 8 seconds in a 5+3 game. So this is where we talk about time management. Right now, Black should have this game won easily, but Black played quickly. In fact, he used 5 seconds, which means he used 8 seconds to take the pawn. 8 seconds and took the pawn. Not the best way to go. I even like this move. Keeps the king from protecting it and keeps the pawn from queening. So he has no hope even right now. Right now he's like, what do I do? I mean, where does he go? What does he do? If he goes over here, you can actually just come here and say check. Oh, but he does get. But then we get back to this situation when we know this doesn't work for Black. Right? Black can't go anywhere. The king starts coming over. You go here, we check again. You go back. King gets to come take that pawn first. Over here, we check. Oh, sorry. We check again. King can go back, and the king can come. This is not going to be threefold repetition because it has to be the exact same position. And every time that king moves, it's not the same position. And once that pawn is taken, it can't be the same position. So yeah, queen to h3. I like it too. I like it too, Ratchet. And I'm not saying that I would have found it in the game. I think I would have just done this simple play, but I do like it. But you have 5 minutes in a 5 minute game. I think I might have found that if I spent 3 minutes to finish the game, I'm up a whole queen. I can play it in 30 seconds with a 3 second increment. I can finish this game in 30 seconds, if not less. If I get rid of those two white pawns, it's just checkmating the king. So that should be easy. Make sense? I hope it makes sense. Okay. Let's do one more game. We're getting a load of games in today. Not usually get this many. Let's see a fun one someone else won. Oh, Leonard's online. Let's check out a Leonard win. And Leonard had a win against the Modern Ancient. He had a win against Noah, and he had a win against Chris. Go look at his win against Noah. All right, this is one of my students, and if you noticed, Leonard is not getting his king out early. He's not taking over the file. He is setting up his queenside pawns, which is his strength. And first time we've seen anybody put the rook on the semi-open file instead of the open file. Now, the only danger I see here is that rook is going to be able to come in here for the open file. But first things first, the king or the pawn has to protect. So the king protects. Not a bad idea. Ooh, and we get, let's trade pawns, buddy. You can't take, but I'm going to take, right? Can't take absolute pin. Nice, simple idea. By the way, he could have went all the way, but then I'd be worried because the king would get in, right? King would get in, and he's still protecting the pawn. So this is better. Force a trade of pawns. And now he says, no, I'm not going to force a trade of pawns. So interesting choice. If that was Leonard's thinking at the beginning, I would have said go all the way because he can't take en passant. So you have the same situation without this pawn there already. So I don't know if he wanted the pawn there or not, but we get here and the king gets in and the king's going to win this pawn. We'll see what else he might win. I'm curious how he won this game because right now White is looking very good. He's got a true passed pawn and he's got a very active king. King comes over to keep the rook out, right? We've talked about that. That rook has only these squares back. None of these squares are now available for that rook. Now the pawn was protecting, but there's a pawn attacking. So now this king has nothing to do over here. Nothing to do over here. So what do we get? We just get a blunder. If I realized this game was just going to be hinged on a blunder, we wouldn't have looked at it. Yes, it does. Protect pass pawn. Exactly, Ratchet. Ratchet. Thank you. But yeah, that's just a blunder, right? That's sad. And so we can stop looking at this game. I think White is fine. White's king would like to get back into the game, and he can because this rook can't come here. But right now, the rook holds this pawn, and the rook keeps the king out. So some other things White could do is maybe start see if he could trade off some pawns of his own, get some more momentum. This king isn't going out here. This rook isn't going out here. This rook isn't going here. Only place this rook is going is here. And so otherwise, White can leave everything status quo, don't change anything, leave it alone. But he could start operations on this side of the board and get other pawns pushing, and again get some freedom. I think he would have had a good game. Could have been in there. All right. I have no clue, Chris. Whoever they were, let's ban them. I have no clue who that was or why they would say such a thing. Thank you for moderating, as always. All right, so let's see. Do we have anything else that? No, that's about it. So again, we went over a few end games. I feel like we've kind of covered everybody. Brandon, the big winner, we've covered a few of his games. Chess Wizard, Mana Nation, Sudaku's. Chris, I think we looked at your win, right? But your win was Sudaku's never moved, never moved, unfortunately. So you did have a draw though. And by the way, draws in this was chess fine. Draws made sense because it started off with a drawn position. So if this ends up with a draw, that means you played everything right. I kind of like, again, Chris, like Brandon did, you found an open file to utilize. So I'm liking that. And now this is a mistake, though, Chris. Here's where you had a passed pawn. You can make a passed pawn whenever you can. You want to make the passed pawn. Now, granted, you made a passed pawn anyway. You made a passed pawn anyway. Um, so I can't really fault you. Rook gets in behind yours. You get to chase the king. And we get this really nice situation where you have some dynamics here. But unfortunately, right, the king is still chasing. And so now he's taking off all your pawns. And right here, I remember watching this game too. I was thinking, maybe you come here first instead. This still keeps the king out. Now, unfortunately, this is a position we've studied where the rook is going to be able to just continuously chase your king. And if you ever go far enough away that he can attack your pawn, you're done for in that sense, right? You're going to lose the pawn. So if you want to keep holding on to the pawn, unfortunately, he gets to keep checking you. So that was this one is very much like a study that we did. In fact, the Lucina and Philidor positions we talked about, and the king being in front. Yeah, earlier would have been nice. I agree, Ratchet. I agree. Yeah, Chess Wizard. I remember you asked that, and I think it just doesn't give you any points for your third draw. So it's not punishing you in a sense. It is right. If you're thinking about winning the tournament, you might think, "Oh, that's I lose. I didn't get any points." So you don't get the 1 point for 3 draws in a row. I believe that is true in the arena tournaments. In the arena tournaments. So yeah, this is just a missed opportunity, I think, but also this is very Josh right now because of this position. We've been here. And yeah, it'd be great to get this king here, but we know what's going to happen. We're going to start. He's going to start checking you. Now, if we went back a move, go back to where we had the pawn here. So at this point, if White could get his king in here, that would be great. But we still know that Black, because he's in the correct position, he's behind the king. He could keep chasing, right? So instead of that, we could try something where we're going to move here. But again, he could keep chasing. And he could keep chasing. And he could keep chasing. Not really. Not really. Right? He can move back. And we didn't really get anywhere yet. And if he comes all the way back here, I have no clue. I have no clue. Maybe he just attacks the pawns that you pretty much have to push or put the rook in front, and then he can always come back. Anyway, good game, and yes, if you ended in a draw, that was well played, equally played, well done. No problems in any of that. So we had on Monday 7 games played in the Endgames Rule Arena with 9 players. No, 7 games played by Chris. Sorry, I knew we had more than 7 games played. So if we go back to the tournament, we had 27 games played. 27. I'll show full screen so you guys can see that. Sorry. So we had 27 games played. And you should be, Chris, totally should be satisfied with a draw. It was an equal position to start with. Someone would have to make a mistake. Another one would have to play the right move. Someone else would have to make a mistake. And that's how the game starts, right? Start the game in equal position. Even if they want to give white a little bit for moving first, in equal position. Somebody always makes a mistake eventually, and that's how you lose the game. Mistakes are how we lose the game, or how we win the game is our opponents make more mistakes than we do, or at least they make the last mistake. All right, so 27 games were played. We had 1,485 moves, and we had all those moves, remembering, with a starting position that looked like this. So that's a lot of moves with a starting position that looks like this. All right, Douglas Hain, you are in the live stream. You have joined the team. I've added you. Is that you, Ratchet, or is that someone else? But you're in the team. All right. So what else do we have to cover today? Oh, you know what? I do want to go take a quick look and see how. Oh, that's you. Excellent, excellent. So, Chris, I have no idea who had a problem with their language, but again, thank you for being a mod. Chris is one of my mods. I really appreciate you for doing all of that, and I appreciate all of you guys for working out, learning with me, and going over things. So we did rook and pawn end games. We've done pawn end games. By the way, oh, I should share this because I did terrible at this. Both chess.com and Lichess has puzzles. I went and did puzzles on Lichess with my class. And one of the things they have is by category. So last week we did pawn, king and pawn end games. Feel free to go out here and do end games. And beautifully, they have easiest, easier, normal, harder, and hardest for you to choose from. You have multiple choices of what level you want to do the puzzles. Feel free to start at easiest. If you get 10 in a row, then move on to the next one, which is easier, right? So if we do this one, and I got 1. All right, let's see if I can get 2 in a row. My gut says just take and then take and eat and eat. All right, 2 in a row. Let's see. He's going to get this one, maybe. I feel like I almost have to let him have that one. If I don't like being passive. I don't like coming back. But if I come back, if he comes here, we take, he takes, and we're still passive. Don't like passive. Much prefer being aggressive. So let's be aggressive and take. All right, got 3 in a row. This one's easier. I only have 2 choices, right? I can't go here and I can't take. Well, let's see. If we go here, he queens. So we can't go there. We have to go here, and then he comes here. Now, if I go here, he queens, I take, he can queen. So it's time for us to queen. Yay. All right. So we got 3 in a row. Can we get 4 in a row fast? I feel like I'm doing the racing program instead of this one. So always my first inclination is always taking the opposition. It's just a habit. I want to take the opposition. These pawns are going to be annoying. But I can't see going after this pawn, giving up this pawn. Let's see. Takes. He can't go straight after that pawn, so he has to come here. Take. He has to go here. Take. And I think we would win. All right. So we're going to go with that route. All right. So you got to count sometimes. You got to see. So his king can't come here, but if he does, we get the pawn. His king can't go anyplace else and hold on to the pawn. So we're going to get him in Zugzwang, where he has no moves. All right, moving along. So anyway, I think I could get 10 in a row at easiest, right? I think so, definitely. All right, so then if I get 10 in a row at easiest, I suggest you then bump it up to easier. First of all, builds up confidence, remind you of what you're doing in the puzzles, you feel good. So right now the king can't go here. The king can go here to hold, I'm sorry. We're white. We're black. I mean, we're black. Okay, got to make sure I remember which way I'm going too. So black's going this way, and so let's see. So white didn't take our pawn because we take his pawn, and he would have been behind us. I don't know. I don't know. That feels like it should have been a draw anyway. But now I feel like we can come here. But oh wait, white's pawn is going that way. That's part of the problem. No, it isn't. Going this way. Gosh, my brain. I feel brain dead today. I really do. So if we go here, the best he's got is the pawn here. So I'm going to go with that. And now the king to hold on to the pawn has to stay here, which he can't stay there. So we win the pawn. All right. So that's at easier. And then if you get 10 in a row on easier, 10 in a row on easier, go do normal. If you get, once you're good enough to get 10 in a row at normal, 10 in a row, go to harder. You can get 10 in a row on harder, go to the final one, which is hardest. And once you're doing 10 in a row on hardest, you've got to be awesome. So do that to improve your end games, specifically pawn end games. They have queen, rook end games. They have queen end games. Rook end games do the same thing. Start at easiest and work your way up. Remember these, we're teaching mostly beginners, so I suggest you start there and then you move up. Hey, thanks, Ratchet. Nice to meet you. Glad you could join us. All right, so again, rook end games sometimes feel easier than the pawn end games because you have a rook, and sometimes it seems obvious what you got to do with your rook. So check that out when you get a chance. Obviously, I don't like this unless white was coming this way, and white isn't. White is trying to go that way. So if you trade off rooks right now, then this pawn, oh, actually, this pawn is coming this way. But still, if you traded off rooks here, the king gets to go here, and the king, oh, can't get there, but he could go on this side. That pawn's going to queen. So it looks like we actually can do this because that pawn's going to queen faster. Beautiful. Anyway, so you get the idea. Do the rook end games, do the pawn end games, and you're good to go. You get 10 in a row on hardest, you should deserve a chess master title. Yeah, I should give out master points like in the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer. Give out chess master points to my students. We could keep a leaderboard of how many chess master points my students have. Like Brandon would have definitely earned a chess master point for his game against Dola Bender. For sure. For sure. All right, let's go check out our buddy Sudakus' tournament. Let's see how his tournament's doing. He's got 9 people in there right now, probably all playing in the tournament.
This is freaking stressful. Oh, look at that. How was that
So he does pretty good with his
mocking
language. Once in a while, I know he
Scottish
uses,
friends?
but freaking is one of his favorite words in that sense. But it's cool. All right, let's rate our buddy Sudakus
Oh man.
chess.
Hey, if you
All
want to
right.
join the Discord, just click there and join.
Oh, there's
There
only
I
one.
post
Oh, three. It moves around.
nudes.
All right, guys. We will
No, I
see you later.
don't.
Have a
Can you
great
imagine?
day.
No, I
I'll
don't.
see you Friday. We'll be playing viewers. So
I post
we will be
some
doing end
stupid
games, but
stuff
we'll be
when I'm
playing
off
viewers.
hours.
And next week we'll do something different. Thanks.